My parents took my inheritance to buy my brother a new house now there. Homeless and begging me for help they'll never get. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I've always been treated like the spare part of my family. You know that feeling? When you're in the room, but no one ever really sees you? That was my entire childhood. My parents had 2 sons, me and my older brother, Ethan. And somehow, from the moment we were born, the universe, or maybe just my parents, decided that he was the main character and I was the background extra. Ethan got everything new. A shiny red bike when he turned 7, while I got the one he'd outgrown, complete with chipped paint and a wobbly seat. He got after-school tutors and weekend getaways. I got, "You're smart enough on your own." When he wanted to play soccer, they signed him up immediately. When I asked to join art classes, Mom said, "That's a waste of money, sweetheart. Be practical." Still, I tried to make peace with it. I told myself they just had higher expectations for me, or maybe they were stricter because they believed I could handle it. That's what you do when you're desperate for love. You rewrite reality just to make it hurt less. I remember one night when I was 12. Ethan had just scored a goal at his championship game, and the house was glowing with celebration. Opened a bottle of wine. Mom made his favorite dinner, and they kept replaying the video of his goal like it was divine intervention. I'd brought home a perfect report card that same day, quietly left it on the counter, and watched them pass it without a glance. That night, I told myself it didn't matter. Deep down, I knew it did. Every ignored effort, every quiet meal, every maybe next time, it built something inside me. Something heavy. I didn't know it yet, but that invisible weight would shape every choice I made, and every heartbreak that was still waiting to come. When my grandfather passed away, I expected grief, not a storm that would define the rest of my life. He was the only one in my family who treated me like I mattered. The man taught me how to fish, fix things, and listen without judgment. So when the lawyer called us in to read his will, I sat there quietly, expecting nothing but closure. But then I heard my name. He'd left a significant inheritance split equally between Ethan and me, $150,000 each. For a moment, the room froze. I caught my mother's glance at my father, that subtle, nervous exchange like something wasn't part of the plan. Ethan smirked, already acting like the money was his. Later that night, Mom sat beside me at the kitchen table. Her voice softened in that manipulative way only she could manage. "Honey, you know, your brother's starting a family soon. He needs help with a down payment on a house." I stared at her, confused. "So you want my inheritance to go to Ethan?" She smiled like it was obvious. "It's not about money. It's about family." Dad joined in the next morning saying, "You've always been the smart one, son. You'll make it on your own. Ethan just needs a little head start." I wanted to scream, to ask them why my future was always negotiable while Ethan's was sacred. But instead, I said nothing. I just nodded, heart pounding, because deep down, I was afraid that saying no would finally make them stop pretending to love me altogether. I spent that night lying awake, the old house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I could feel my grandfather's photo watching from the shelf, and all I could think was he gave me that money so I could finally stand on my own. But in this family, even a dying man's wish wasn't strong enough to break the golden boy's spell. It started small, little conversations that didn't feel dangerous until I realized how deep they'd sunk their hooks. My mom would bring up Ethan every chance she got. "You know, your brother's trying so hard to be a good husband," she'd sigh over dinner. "But it's tough with all those bills." And Dad would chime in. "He's got a lot on his shoulders. Not everyone's as independent as you." Independent, that was their favorite word for me. It sounded like a compliment, but it was really permission, their way of excusing why they never lifted a finger for me. I'd spent years trying to earn their approval, and now they were using that loyalty against me. The guilt campaign lasted weeks. Texts, calls, unexpected visits. Mom even cried once, holding my hand like she was in a soap opera. "You've always been the responsible one," she whispered. "If you help now, it'll bring this family closer together." I wanted to believe her. God help me, I did. I told myself it was temporary, that I was just letting them hold the money until I found a better investment. I even made them promise to keep it untouched. They both nodded eagerly, saying all the right words. The day I transferred the inheritance to their account, my stomach twisted. Something about it didn't feel right. Mom hugged me, tears in her eyes. "You're saving your brother's life," she said. Dad patted my back, adding, "You're the glue that keeps this family together." But later that night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, a strange silence filled me. Not peace, not pride, just emptiness, like I just handed over the last piece of my worth to people who never valued it in the first place. And in my gut, I already knew I'd made a mistake I could never undo. 3 months passed. Didn't think much about the money. I tried to trust them, even when it gnawed at the back of my mind. But one random Saturday morning, that uneasy feeling finally demanded attention. My coworker Jenna sent me a link to a real estate post. "Hey," she texted, "isn't this your brother?" There he was, Ethan and his wife, standing proudly in front of a brand new 2-story suburban house, beaming like they'd just conquered the world. The caption read, "Finally homeowners, hard work pays off." Ugh. My blood ran cold. I called my mom immediately. "Did you give them the money?" There was a pause, too long, too careful. Then she said softly, "It's not what you think, honey. It's an investment for the family. Ethan will pay it back once he's stable." "An investment," I repeated. "You stole my inheritance to buy him a house?" Dad's voice entered the background, defensive, booming. "Watch your tone. That money helps all of us. You're part of this family too." "No," I said, voice shaking. "You help them, not me." What followed was pure gaslighting. "You're overreacting," Mom said. "It's still in the family. You act like we betrayed you." I wanted to laugh, scream, cry, anything, but instead I just listened. As my parents twisted every word, turning theft into sacrifice and manipulation into love. After that call, I stopped answering their messages. Every family group text felt like poison. Ethan posted more photos, new furniture, barbecues, baby announcements, all built on what was supposed to be my chance at freedom. For the first time in my life, I saw the truth clearly. My parents didn't just favor Ethan. They chose him over me, over fairness, over decency, and I swore I'd never give them another chance to take anything from me again. Cutting them off wasn't easy. I'd spent my entire life believing family was something you earned through patience, through forgiveness. But I finally understood that some people only love you as long as you're useful. So, I blocked my parents' numbers, changed mine a few weeks later, moved to a new apartment closer to work. They didn't take it quietly. I started hearing things from cousins, uncles, family friends, how I'd abandoned my parents after everything they'd done for me. How ungrateful I was. Mom had turned herself into a victim, crying to anyone who'd listen. Dad apparently told everyone I was bitter and jealous of Ethan's success that I'd paid for. The first few months were rough. The guilt crept in every night. I'd catch myself scrolling through old photos, birthdays, holidays, forced smiles, trying to convince myself I wasn't the monster they made me out to be. But each time, that same image would flash in. My head, Ethan in front of his new house, grinning, while I sat in my half-furnished apartment, still saving every dime I could. So, I poured everything into work. The overtime, the late nights. I told myself I was rebuilding from scratch. And somehow, that pain turned into fuel. I got promoted, then promoted again. I started traveling, seeing the world beyond the small bubble my parents had trapped me in. Years went by. I heard little from them. A few vague holiday messages I ignored. An occasional "we miss you" that sounded more like a test than a truth. But deep down, I still carried that ache. The part of me that once wanted their approval now just wanted them to feel what they'd done. To finally face the consequences of choosing one son at the cost of losing the other. And I had no idea that moment was coming sooner than I ever imagined. It had been almost 4 years since I'd last spoken to them. Life had stabilized. Good job, decent apartment, quiet evenings that finally felt peaceful. But peace has a strange way of ending when the past refuses to die. It started with an email. Subject line, "We need to talk." It was from my mother. I almost deleted it, but something in me, maybe old habits, made me open it. The message was short. "Your brother is going through a tough time. We really need your help. Please call us." Against my better judgment, I did. The moment Mom heard my voice, she burst into tears. Ethan's house is in foreclosure, she sobbed. He lost his job, and the bank's taking everything. He's got a baby, for God's sake. You can't just let your brother lose his home. I stood there, stunned. You mean the house you bought with my inheritance? She ignored that part. You have savings now, don't you? You're doing well. If you could just lend him a bit to help him back on his feet, I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. You took everything from me once. You think I'm stupid enough to do it again? Dad grabbed the phone then, his voice low and angry. You've changed. We raised you better than this. Family doesn't turn its back when things get hard. Family doesn't steal from each other, I said coldly. The call ended with shouting, them accusing me of being selfish, heartless, ungrateful. And for a moment, I wondered if they were right. Then Ethan himself texted me later that night. If you ever cared about us, you'll help. Don't make Mom and Dad suffer. But what they didn't know, what I was about to find out, was that the money wasn't all gone. And their lies went much deeper than I ever imagined. A week after that call, my cousin Liam reached out, someone I actually trusted. He sounded hesitant. Hey man, I don't want to stir things up, but I think you should see something. He sent me screenshots from a family group chat I'd been removed from years ago. My parents had been lying to everyone, telling people I'd refused my inheritance, claiming I'd donated it so Ethan could start his family. According to them, I was too career-driven to care about family. That was it. I'd swallowed enough guilt to last a lifetime. So when Liam mentioned there was going to be a big family barbecue that weekend hosted by my uncle, I knew I had to go. Not for revenge, but for the truth. When I arrived, conversations died. My mother froze mid-laugh. Ethan looked like he'd seen a ghost. Didn't expect to see you here, Dad said stiffly. I smiled, calm but cold. I figured it was time to clear the air. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I just told the truth. In front of everyone, I explained how they'd pressured me to hand over my inheritance. How they'd promised it was temporary. How that money bought Ethan's house. Gasps, whispers, faces shifting between disbelief and pity. Ethan tried to defend himself, stammering, "You said you didn't need it." I cut him off. "No, Mom and Dad said that. You just cashed the check." My father's voice rose, trembling with anger. "You don't air family business like this." "Maybe you should have thought of that before stealing from me," I shot back, for the first time in my life. They looked small, cornered by their own lies. Mom's face crumbled. Ethan walked out without a word. The silence afterward was deafening. That night, as I left the party, my uncle patted my shoulder. "Took guts, son," he said quietly. They needed to hear it. But I knew the confrontation wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the reckoning they'd been avoiding for years. After that confrontation, everything went quiet. The kind of silence that doesn't heal, it just lingers, heavy and cold. My parents stopped calling completely. Ethan vanished from social media, and for the first time I felt free. No guilt. No manipulation. Just an empty kind of peace. I threw myself into work again, but this time it wasn't out of pain, it was survival. I bought my first home, a modest little place with creaking floors and a view of the city skyline. Every corner felt like proof that I'd built something without them. Some nights, I'd sit on the porch with a beer, watching the sun fade behind the buildings, thinking this is what independence actually feels like. Years passed that way. Birthdays came and went. I'd get the occasional text from distant relatives, "You should call your parents." They're not getting any younger, but I ignored them. I'd spent my whole life chasing their approval. I wasn't about to spend another decade chasing their regret. Then, one winter, I heard Ethan's marriage had fallen apart. His wife left him, taking their son to live with her parents. A cousin told me, "Your folks sold some land to help him pay off debt." My parents were unraveling quietly, trying to hold on to the illusion of control as everything slipped away. Sometimes I'd see old photos, all of us smiling, pretending we were a normal family. I'd wonder if they ever looked back and realized what they'd destroyed. But the truth was, I didn't need an apology anymore, because I finally understood something. You can forgive people and still never let them back in your life. And just when I thought the past had buried itself for good, life decided to dig it back up in the most unexpected way. It was a rainy Tuesday when the past came crashing back. I was leaving work late when my phone rang, an unknown number. Normally, I'd ignore it, but something made me answer. Is this Daniel? The voice was shaky, fragile. My mother. I froze, Mom. She exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. We need your help, please. I didn't say anything at first. Just listened to the sound of her crying. Between sobs, she explained, they'd lost everything. Ethan had defaulted on his loans again, and in trying to help him, they'd sold their house, emptied their savings, even cashed out what was left of their retirement. Now they were living out of their car, parked behind a closed-down diner. I felt the world tilt under me. The same people who once called me selfish were now begging for the kindness they'd never shown. We have nowhere else to go, she whispered. Please, son. It's freezing out here. Dad came on the line next. His voice, once booming and full of authority, was trembling. We made mistakes, he said softly, but we're still your parents. I wanted to feel pity. I really did. But all I could think about was that 12-year-old boy watching his parents celebrate. Ethan's goals, while his own achievements went unnoticed. All I could think about was my inheritance, stolen so they could play house with their favorite child. Still, that night I drove out there. I parked a block away and saw their car-fogged windows, a blanket hanging over the back seat. My mom's silhouette barely moved. My dad sat in the driver's seat, staring blankly ahead. For a long moment, I just watched. Every emotion fought inside me, rage, sorrow, disbelief. But when my mother's head lifted slightly, scanning the road like she sensed me, I quietly shifted into drive and left, because this time, I wasn't the forgotten son anymore. I was the man who finally remembered his worth. A week passed before they reached out again, this time through my cousin Liam. He said my parents wanted to meet just to talk, against every instinct screaming no. I agreed. Maybe part of me still needed to hear them admit what they'd done. Maybe I just wanted closure. We met at a small diner off the highway, kind that smells like burnt coffee and old apologies. When I walked in, they were already seated in a corner booth. Mom looked thinner, older. Dad's shoulders were slumped, his hands trembling around a chipped mug. For a moment, I almost didn't recognize them. Mom started first. We didn't mean for things to end up like this, she said quietly. We were just trying to help your brother. I let out a dry laugh. You stole from me? That's not helping, that's betrayal. We thought you'd understand. You've always been the strong one. I leaned back, staring at her. Being strong doesn't mean being your scapegoat. Dad cleared his throat, his voice cracking. We're sorry, truly. We shouldn't have taken your money. But we're desperate, son. Just a few weeks of help until we find a place. No, I said simply. Mom's expression shifted, sorrow curdling into anger. You'd really let your parents suffer like this? After everything we've done for you? I met her eyes. Everything you've done to me, you mean? The silence after that was suffocating. The clink of dishes, the hum of old music, it all blurred into static. I stood up, reached into my wallet, and placed enough cash on the table to cover their meal. That's the last thing I'll ever owe you, I said. As I walked out, I heard Mom's quiet sobs. Dad didn't say a word. I didn't look back, because this time, leaving wasn't weakness, it was freedom. In the days that followed, I expected guilt to set in, maybe regret. But instead, there was just quiet, not the cold, aching kind from before, but a calm I'd never known. For once, I wasn't waiting for an apology that would never come. It didn't take long for the fallout to start. Words spread quickly through the family, twisting like wildfire. Some relatives said I'd abandoned my parents in their time of need. Others whispered that I'd finally stood up for myself. I didn't bother defending my side. People will always choose the story that fits their comfort. Then, one night, Ethan texted me. Just one message. I'm sorry. You were right. They ruined everything. I stared at it for a long time. No excuses, no manipulation, just shame. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. For the first time, I wasn't angry at him anymore. I just felt done, like a chapter had finally closed. A week later, I got an email from a distant aunt. She'd run into my parents at a shelter downtown. They were volunteering there in exchange for meals. I didn't respond, but the image lingered. My father, once so proud and loud, now washing dishes for food. My mother, serving the people she used to look down on. It wasn't joy I felt. It wasn't even revenge. It was balance. The universe had finally caught up. Still, there was an ache in me. Not for them, but for what could have been. For the family that never existed outside my imagination, because the truth was I didn't hate them anymore. I just no longer needed them. And in that realization, I finally understood what real peace costs. Letting go of the people who taught you how to suffer. Months passed, and life quietly moved on. I focused on work, on rebuilding the parts of myself I'd neglected for years. My home became more than just walls and furniture. It became peace made visible. Sometimes when I'd sit on the couch after a long day, I'd think about everything that had happened. Not with anger, but with a strange, detached clarity. I hadn't spoken to my parents since that diner meeting. But one evening, while sorting through mail, I found an envelope with no return address. Inside was a short note in my mother's handwriting. "We're sorry. We understand now. We won't bother you again. Take care." I must have read it a dozen times. Her handwriting was shaky, uneven, the same hand that used to sign permission slips, now trembling with exhaustion. I didn't cry. I didn't even feel vindicated, just... Still, a few days later, I made a quiet decision. I called the shelter my aunt had mentioned and spoke to the director. I arranged for a small monthly donation to cover 2 beds and meals anonymously. I didn't want them to know. It wasn't forgiveness. It was closure. Mercy in its coldest form. Because I realized something then. Sometimes justice isn't about watching people suffer. It's about freeing yourself from the need to see it happen. I kept living. New friends, new routines, a life built on boundaries and self-respect. Every now and then, I'd catch glimpses of Ethan online. Older, humbler, raising his son alone. I never reached out. I didn't need to. People think revenge is loud, dramatic, explosive, but sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just choosing peace while they drown in the consequences of their own choices. And as I stood by my window one night, city lights flickering below, I whispered the truth that had taken me a lifetime to learn. They took everything from me once. I took nothing back. And that's how I won.